Hello, this is Brian from Tavarn Games, and instead of my usual Little Veil update, which this week would have just been, I wrote more dialogue and got a little burnt out writing dialogue, so I wanted to work on something else for a little bit before going back to it. That's something else I decided to work on this week was Dungeons & Dragons map making software. So I play Dungeons & Dragons with my friends, and one of them is now having to play online, so we're now using sort of the online tools like Roll20 and D&D Beyond and Discord and Incarnate and stuff like that to do our D&D playing. Well, I sort of had the idea of, why not I make a piece of software that will allow the DM to build up maps and encounters and campaigns, and then have a playable aspect where you could then have the players walk around that map and then have the DM overseeing it, like hosting the game and overseeing it. So I just started that this week. I don't have a huge amount done, but here's a little snippet of what I've done. So I've already loaded into a bit of a map. There's nothing fancy here. Right now, I just have some basic things. These like stone brick walls, wooden walls, wood flooring, stone flooring. I made up the sprite art for that. And spawn location. So for the walls, let's say we want to switch and do some wood walls. If we click and drag, we'll see this box will appear and show us where the walls will go and give us a preview. And we can just tack that on and the walls will show up. If we click on a piece of wall without dragging, it will then delete that the old wall. So let's say we want to put like 2 rooms up here. We can do that. The flooring, let's say we want some stone flooring in this section. Just drag and drop, and it will only place where it can. It won't place underneath the wall. So see, we get rid of that wall. There's no floor beneath it. And we can do that a fair bit. We can individually click as well. So let's say we want to just individually click a little sort of like foyer room there. We can do that. Put some floors in, go back, put an area like a doorway so you can get in there. Oh, forgot a floor there. And you see we can build up this system. Now for this utility thing like this spawn point, the idea I have is that you have this 5x5 square around the spawn point, and the players will randomly spawn in that area. So you can specify where you want them to spawn, but then we can have a bunch of players and they won't overlap with each other. They'll sort of all spawn in here, and you don't have to manually individually put a spawn point for each player. So that's what that red box represents. Now, of course, given that this is the spawn point, you can only have one. So I've made it so if you click down a new one, it goes back and deletes the old one and make sure you only have one. So let's see, we went there. Now you can manually delete it and get rid of it completely, at which point the spawn point will just go around the origin of the map, whatever the 0 point is. I'm not even sure where it is on this map. And then the other thing you can see me doing is I've got the camera working, so if I hold the middle mouse button, I can move it around, I can zoom in and out, I can use the arrow keys to move, so that's all working nicely. And then, yeah, if I click these icons again, it'll get rid of that. So my plan is to have, the walls would have one icon here and then a secondary menu that will show up and all the different types of walls. Same thing for the floors. And then have like furniture you can place and like wall adornments, so you can put like paintings and banners and stuff. And then these utilities and, characters and like NPCs and enemies would be able to be placed. And then these utilities, which could be things like notepad for the DM, so we could have a little icon that only the DM can see. And they could click it and it would show a note, so that way they can keep the notes in the campaign. And not have them visible to the players, things like that, as well as the entry points to each map they could have marked out to show things, teleportation points. So if you want to have multiple floors, you could draw the other floor in another and then have like a little teleportation point at a staircase that cause the player to instantly jump over, so that they could simulate going up and down the stairs. And then, the only other real feature here, we have this floor grid. We can show or hide that, so I think that's kind of nice. I tried to make it fairly subtle, but it shows the 5-foot grid. And I haven't done it yet, but I'm going to make that toggleable for the players as well in their settings. But yeah, so let's save that map. So there's no notification here that it's been saved, but it has. And we can exit to the menu. So right now, it looks pretty basic. Like, I've just used the basic buttons and fonts. But yeah, let's go back into that, or into the edit menu. So if we wanted to create a new campaign, you could call it, people have probably heard of Candlekeep. So let's say you wanted to put Candlekeep in the game. You could make the campaign. It'll instantly add to the list. You go in there. You can then start making maps. So you say you want a library map. So you create the library, and then it will show up. we can go in and boom, you're in there, you're in the editor, you can start drawing, designing, whatever you want. Let's not spend too long in here, just put it down the floor. Save that, and when you click the button, it deletes that ghost object just to make sure you don't place one underneath the menu. Let's go back. So it loads here. To show that that still exists, we can go into library. There we go. It's there. So go into this one. I just called Darkest Dungeon because I've been playing that a lot lately. Go back into the manor, and there's our old manor menu. So that's all working nicely. And then the other thing I've got done is sort of a single player preview. So that's this play campaign. So let's go into that manor we did. So here's where it is. Go into that, and we'll spawn into that spawn location. We have an exit game button. Oh, not sure why it ended up here. It should be in the bottom corner, but whatever. And yeah, so we can zoom the camera in and out, but we can't independently move the camera. We can only move the player. And you can see I've put this sort of light mask onto the game, so you can only see from top down what the player would be able to see. So these columns are blocking the light, so we can't see what's on the wall on the other side of the column. Same thing, we've got these walls blocking it, so we can only just see through the doorway. So that's working nicely. I mean, as we walk around, that of course changes. It kind of looks 3D, which is cool, but it's just drawing out a circle around the character, and then seeing in that circle, in each of the rays, where it hits a point, and then it's editing a spline object. Actually, there's two splines, one on the left and one on the right, because they get a little angry if you have overlapping points. So that allowed me to have it so that you have this internal void that you can see through. And so it's just hitting the spline and saying, oh, we hit an object here, add a little bit of space so you can see the wall, and then tell the spline to put a point there. And then it just goes around the circle, puts all the points in for where it hits colliders, and then it fills out the spline to cover the rest of the screen as far as you can zoom out. So if we go scene view, you can see it goes really far out just to make sure everything is covered that the player couldn't see. I didn't want anything to be visible. And yeah, let's zoom back in, and we can move around, and we can explore. So let's say we explore this room, and then the only thing we see is this room. When you get to the wall, because of that extra little space I add to where the collision is, you get this fun effect where you can see the wall directly in front of you, but then the rest ends up kind of covered up, which I thought was accidental, but I thought, hey, this is actually kind of realistic. If you're standing right next to a wall, you can see what's right in front of you very clearly, but looking down the wall, you can just barely see the edge of things. And I thought this kind of makes that a little, or kind of simulates that accidentally, but it looks pretty cool. I like it. So I'm going to keep it that way. But yeah, we can walk around and do that. Use the arrow keys to explore, just a tile at a time, and check out this map we've put together. So yeah, and then you can just exit that. You'll end up back at that campaign menu right now. So there's definitely a ton of work to actually turn this into a real application people could use and be happy with. The next step will be getting a multiplayer, like actually getting the networking and multiplayer working. I've started that, but haven't made too much progress yet. But the idea will be that the DM would be able to host a campaign, and it would bring up sort of a campaign world menu or a world map that would have all the different locations, and the DM can do all their talking. And then the players will load in, and then they can sort of see the world map, decide where they want to go, and then the DM would be able to load that actual encounter area or encounter map they've made, and the players will automatically jump into that. They can explore. After that, I have to get sort of the NPCs and monsters put in. I'm not sure how much I'll be allowed to hard code into the game, whether Wizards of the Coast will be happy if I just copy monster stats from their book directly into the game, or if I just need to have sort of an NPC and monster editor where the DM can basically put in the stats themselves and choose the icon. So they would have to own the manual and know the actual stats. So then, Wizards of the Coast gets their money, and then they could then add that to a list that's in their game that could be loaded into the side menu, with the icons being stored so that all the players would be able to see them. I think that's probably the route I'll have to go. And yeah, I want to get in that you can create a character sheet in the game, so that this would actually be able to control the rolling and the hits and damage rolls and all of that. So I would need the character sheets in. Hopefully I can use the D&D Beyond import from D&D Beyond, so people can build their character using the wonderful tool that Wizards of the Coast has already made, and get that going. So yeah, this is sort of my latest project. I hope to bring you more updates on that. If you want to stick around, I can show you a bit of the coding. There's nothing too crazy. So the first thing you've got is, the map save object is right now the only save object, and it's pretty simple. It just has the ID of the object, like what is the actual object name in the game. Here, let's actually play that. So if we go into the resources folder, that would be this name. So floor stone is, the name of stone floor, floor wood, wall brick, wall log, and start pause, or start short for start position, of course. And then it saves what type of object it is. So when it's spawning objects in, here, let's actually load back into the game. Let's go into an edit. Each of the objects in the game, so that it knows what to save, is made or saved into a parent object, or loaded into a parent object, I should say. So all the walls get loaded into this wall object. All the floors get loaded into this floor object. Utilities, so that start position and any other ones I make in the future, into the utilities object. And this is very useful because what the game is then doing when you're saving it, so if we go to the save load map, we look in here, and it's basically going and grabbing all the child objects of the known parents, so the walls, the floors, the utilities, eventually the objects and the decorations. And then it can just go through each of those objects and save its name, what to save it into. So all the walls get saved into the walls type, and then its location, and that's it. It makes it super simple to save. I forgot a comment there. And it makes it so that I don't have to put boundaries on the map. The editor, or the DM who's editing it, can just go around and just draw up as big a map as they want, and then this way of saving it makes sure that everything they place ends up saved, no matter where it is. And I don't have to have a map thing. Now, I had actually written a map size script that would say, like, oh, save everything within this area, and actually I need to delete this because it is not useful anymore since I decided to do it this way. And it's just saving into campaigns folder in the persistent data path, using the campaign name. Inside the campaign name folder, there's a maps folder, which then has all the maps saved. So this file structure is important, because if we go over to the campaign manager, which is what I decided to name my menu system, that main menu, what all this is doing when you're going through each of the menus is it's going to, or first it checks to make sure that the campaigns actually exists when you want to, if you want to create one. If it does exist, it just doesn't do anything. It just path already exists into the debug. And then if it does, or if it doesn't exist, you can create it, it creates it. And then when you're loading it, it just literally goes through the directory. It makes sure it exists, that directory, and then it goes and it gets all the directories in it and displays those for the campaign names. And then when you want to load an individual campaign, it just makes sure, okay, does that maps folder in that campaigns folder exist? And if it does, get all the files and display their names on buttons. So that is just a quick and dirty way to be able to see the file structure. There's nothing fancy about it. I will be sort of making that look nicer. I have to make it so that on these menu pages over here, as it reloads scripts, that if there's a ton of maps and it goes down below, that this window will, or UI item will extend downwards and make it scrollable so that you can actually see all the maps and all the campaigns. Because right now, if you were to make enough maps and it ends up down here, yeah, I guess you just can't see them. So that's a limitation at the moment, but we'll get to fixing that. When it comes to the placement of things, we should load the scene. So let's go over to the map maker scene. So each of these UI elements just has this placer UI script, and all it's doing is it's telling it which placement object to load. So if we look at the resources folder, for each object, you have a placer object. So floor stone placer is here. And then that's got the actual placement script attached to it that relates to floors, because the floors and walls have different rules of how they're placed. And so we go to the log wall placer, and it's got the name you want, and then the wall placer script is going to be somewhere. Oh, it's right at the bottom here. And for it, just so that it actually most of the time puts the correct wall image in place based on the surrounding walls, it has this script. It does not always fire right now for some reason, not sure why, but it's mostly working. And so when you click on this item, or this thing, the placer UI script attached to the object, so we're looking at the canvas here, it just tells it, okay, load the wall brick placer into the game and remove any other placer objects that are visible. So that's the placer UI script. Let's open that up. Where are you? I don't know my letters. So when you click on it, it's basically stating, okay, if you're clicking on this item, check if there an existing placer object, or I called it the ghost object, exists, and if it does, we're going to, if it's the same name as the one you have that you're trying to open, it just closes it, just destroys it. If not, it swaps it to another one, so to the other row, or to whatever your new object is. Sorry about that. So that's the placer script itself. If it's swapping, it just destroys the old one, and then it will load a new one if it's told to. So that's just a pretty simple script. I could have probably combined them, but they work fine as two separate scripts. It's not too difficult. But this also keeps track of there's only one ghost object, so that way you don't load in a wall thing and a floor thing at the same time, and they sort of conflict in how they're being placed. Though I do plan on having like a room simulator where you just can click and drag and it will just generate a room for you based on the wall and floor types and columns you want. But that would be a separate script. Yeah, so if we're going to, you go to the placer script, it's fairly simple the way it's working. So it just gets your mouse position and then figures out the world transform point that your mouse is at. And then it rounds that off to a grid position. So that way the objects end up nicely on the grid and snapped automatically. And then just sets the position of whatever the object you're trying to place is to that spot in the grid position. Now, when you press the mouse button down, it tells it, okay, start placing the object. This is how the click and drag ends up working. So it now starts placing. Now, if it is starting to place and you move the mouse to a new position, so you're at a new position, then it starts placing multiple objects. Otherwise, though, if you're back and you're in the original position, it doesn't try to place multiple objects. It only wants to place the one. So if you are placing multiple objects with the walls, what it has to do is it figures out what is the bottom left corner and what is the top right corner. And then from those positions, it's just looping through the width and height if those are greater than 0. So if you're trying to place multiple and you've drawn out a box, this is just telling it, okay, draw along the bottom line, like the bottom line and the top line, draw those, the top and bottom, across the X, and then go and draw the sides and make sure you don't overlap the corners you've already drawn. And so this is for spawning in the ghost objects. So those ghost objects are the preview, basically. And then when you actually let go of the mouse button, it then goes through. So if you're trying to place multiple, it just does that execution again of this code up here. Just this time, it is placing the actual object. I can probably shore up this code and have one function deal with both the ghosts in this, but the copy and paste worked fine, so I just did that. And then otherwise, if you're just placing one object, it checks, can it legally be placed in that square? And if so, put it in place. Otherwise, destroy it. And that's how it also acts as an eraser, is this little destroy here. And yeah, for each of the objects it places, it does check to make sure the position is allowed wherever it's trying to place it before it actually instantiates it. And otherwise, it just destroys whatever it hit. Or in the case of, floors, if you're placing a wall, it will destroy those floors underneath it, so that way you don't have floors existing under the walls, which I thought was a way to reduce the object load and to make sure the map stay nice and clean and give the person making it just a little more control. And so the same thing for the floors. The only difference with the floors is because it's just a solid mass, it just goes from the bottom left to the top right and draws the whole thing and just fills in the entire area using the double for loop. So the go over the X, go over the Y, go through all the area. And then place them if you're placing multiple. So yeah, that's how that's working. When it comes to the player walking around, so that's the other function. So the player controller, you may have spotted a player network script. I'm working on that. It does not work yet. I do not have the networking functioning as of this moment, but I'm hoping to get that done over the next few days and at least get multiple players able to walk around the map. But for now, though, the player is fairly simple. For one thing, it syncs up the main camera with where the player is standing. So this, I do it during the update as well as when you move, but this just makes sure the camera does stay centered on the player. And then if you move, it just fires a movement vector and tells it move in whatever direction it is. So for the move, all it's doing is it's checking, is there a wall in the way, or is there another player in the way, or an object on the default layer in the way? And if there is, or if there isn't, sorry, move into that position, move the camera, and then update the light. So that is that black mask on top that hides parts of the map. So as I sort of talked about, it is a spline. So there are two spline objects. There's one on the left and one on the right. So we first go through the right. So we start at angle 0, so straight vertical, and then work our way around the circle till we get to the bottom. And then we fill in that shape, and that creates our right. And then we do the same on the left, so 180 degrees, 360. And then for each angle, so we go every 2 degrees. I found if you went every single degree, if you were right next to a wall, the script ended up failing because the spline points were too close together and the engine complained. So every 2 degrees, though, this works perfectly fine. When you're standing next to the wall, it draws it out nicely. And but that way, it still has a lot of detail, so it looks good. So it's got the spline point that it's going to add is just set to 0 as a default so that it exists. It then calculates the direction of the ray vector it has to do. So from your position, it calculates, okay, for this angle, the direction is in the X is the sine of it, and the direction in the Y is the cos of it. And it goes for each one, and then it sees, okay, do we hit a wall? Light only stops at walls. It can go through objects and players and floors and all that, of course. So it's just the walls stopping it. So certain objects like trees will actually be like on a wall layer, objects that we want to actually stop the light. And then it's basically telling it, here, does it hit anything? And if it does hit something, at the spline point then becomes where it hits, and then plus the player position to make sure that the spline point is properly centered on the, or minus the player position, sorry, so that the object compensates for the fact that it is a child object of the player. And then it adds that little bit of vector in the X and Y direction equal to half of the direction it's firing in. So that way, that's how you can see into the wall, and it just doesn't end at the floor of the wall, and all you can see is the floors in the game, and all the walls are black. This little direction X and direction Y that the ray's going times 0.5 is what allows you to see the actual edge of the wall, but not through it. Otherwise, though, it just draws out to 100 units, which is 500 feet in the game, is your maximum vision range in each direction. So I figured that was far enough. I don't think we're going to have maps that are too much bigger than that. Besides, the camera doesn't zoom out far enough to even see all that. And then it just draws it out to there, adds that spline point. And then it goes around and adds the corners to fill out the object up to 200 points away, which is well beyond the camera view. So that's how it's covering it in black. So we're drawing the inside of it, and then we're drawing the outside of it, and then that gets all filled in with black. And then we do the same on the left-hand side, and boom, we end up with this light system that we can look at. So actually, let's just go to the scene. Sorry, that's the multiplayer version we're on. So you can see these little black corners here are part of the player object, and those are the light covers. We're actually modifying the splines, and we're adding those points to it. But yeah, as you saw, so here it is in action, as you've already seen. So you have it, so the player's here, it draws out a ray, it hits this corner, so it adds half of the direction to it, and does that around here, so we can actually see the column a little bit. But then the other rays, though, they don't hit the wall till over here, so this ray hits at this point, and then so it adds that little half. And same thing along this wall. So I have to actually move because we can't move the camera. So for each one, it's hitting this wall here and then drawing a little bit extra on. Hitting the wall here, adding a little extra on. So that way we can actually see the edge of the wall instead of basically, if we just did it to where it hits, it would just draw a line here and all you would ever see is the floor. So yeah, that works. It updates really quickly. I've run it on my little Surface laptop, and it has no trouble running on that, which is not the most powerful computer out there. So this should work pretty well on most people's computers. So anyway, that's a rough view of how this program is working so far and what I've gotten done, and hopefully I'll be able to bring you updates of this alongside the Little Veil updates in the future. So think about subscribing if you want to see more of those updates, as well as supporting me on Patreon, where you'll have access to the program itself as I'm working on it, as well as Little Veil, and I'm hoping to add some more fun things for my Patreons to download in the future. Thanks for watching.